When you think of a city, a bustling metropolis filled with big businesses, beautiful landmarks, and massive skyscrapers probably come to mind. There are some cities, however, that's been left almost completely abandoned, eerie and desolate, a sign of a long time past. Here are the top 15 largest abandoned cities on Earth. Number 15. Craco, Italy. As far as abandoned places go, few are as scenic as Craco, Italy. Located in the southern Italian province of Basilicata and was founded back in 540 AD and has a striking appearance due to it having been built on a 400-meter-tall cliff built in such a location so that the town could defend itself from potential invaders. Said defense mechanism worked well 1500 years ago. Yet, it eventually led to the city's downfall. This is because Craco eventually became extremely vulnerable to natural disasters and various landslides led to large amounts of damage being dealt to it. These landslides ultimately became so severe that in 1963 the Italian government forced out all of Craco's residents, having them instead relocate to the nearby town of Craco Peschiera. Since then, it has become a popular tourist attraction. Film locations with movies as iconic as The Passion of Christ and Christ Stopped Italy having been filmed there. Number 14. Thames Town, China. Generally speaking, copies are usually far worse than the originals, and Thames Town in China is a prime example of this. Built to house overflow people from Shanghai, it was built to model Victorian-era London as it features cobbled streets, Victorian terraces, corner shops, and red telephone boxes. Yet despite its charming appearance, it hasn't been very palatable to Shanghai's residences, as despite being designed to hold 10,000 people, it currently remains mostly empty. However, considering that Shanghai is a city that's certainly not on the decline, we're sure people will be forced to move there sooner rather than later. Number 13. Kangbashi District, Ordos City, China. While most city districts are busy, vibrant, and, of course, full of people, Ordos City's business district of Kangbashi is anything but. Located in China's northern region of Inner Mongolia. Construction began in 2003, yet despite it having the capacity to hold up to 300,000 people, as of 2010 it only had a population of about 20 to 30,000. Since then, the population has only grown slightly. Despite massive residential and office skyscrapers and high-tech facilities, it's still a very quiet place to live in. Number 12. Kennecott, United States. The town officially holds the title of the northernmost on this list is Kennecott, located far up north in the snowy state of Alaska. It's notable for having produced about $200 million worth of copper ore between 1911 and 1938, which today would be worth about $3 billion. However, in 1938 the mines officially closed down, making Kennecott a veritable ghost town. Yet since then, it's been incorporated into the Wrangell St. Elias National Park and Preserve, which is the largest national park in the United States, and as a result, it's seen a steady stream of tourists over the years. Number 11. Kaiokoi Turkey. World War I was easily one of the most brutal conflicts in history, but we think you'd agree that few towns felt its effects as strongly as Kaiokoi Turkey. Built in the 1700s, it is located in southwestern Turkey. Yet for years, had sizable Greek population. However, once World War I swung around, the Ottoman Turks began persecuting the Greeks, and this came to head in 1923 when population exchange between the two countries caused Greeks living there to be forced to evacuate, causing the town to quickly become abandoned. It has since become a small-scale terrorist site. Number 10. Oradour-sur-Glane, France. Oradour-sur-Glane was undoubtedly never a large city. It stands apart for having one of the most tragic tales on this list, occupied by the Germans during World War I. It entered the bad books of the Nazis when in 1944, it was reported that resistance fighters from the town had killed highly decorated SS officer Helmut Kampf. As a result, SS officer Adolf Diekmann decided that revenge was in order and thus marched on the city with several SS troops, forcing the men into a barn and the women and children into a church. Both groups were brutally killed by the soldiers due to a mix of gunshot and burn wounds, leading to a total death toll of 642. Almost every single citizen of the town was murdered on that day. Therefore, after the war's conclusions, President Charles de Gaulle ordered that the burned-out ruins of the old city be left untouched as a monument to the victims. As a result, except for a museum, the site remains both uncultivated and uninhabited to this day. Number 9. Ashgabat Turkmenistan. While technically not an abandoned city, a trip through this massive metropolis will make you soon realize that it's on the emptier side. You see, Ashgabat, which is the capital of the former Soviet state of Turkmenistan, is very impressive at first glance, holding the Guinness World Record for having been built with more marble than any other city on the planet. It's full of massive monuments, spectacular statues and intelligent buildings, including a large mosque and a significant sports complex used for the 2017 Asian Indoor Games. Yet, despite all of this glamour, the city remains nearly empty. This is because rather than invest in economic projects, the government has consistently used its massive oil and gas revenues to make Ashgabat a display of wealth in an impoverished nation. As a result, they have always evicted people from their homes without compensation and stifled the free press to allow these building projects to go through despite the country's GDP per capita being less than $7,000. When you further consider that is one of the most expensive places to live in the world, thanks to Turkmenistan's sky-high inflation and lack of access to even the most basic products, it becomes painfully clear why this city has become a massive ghost town. We are constantly adding more people to the top 5 production teams to bring you all the best content. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on and hit the like button. Number 8. Pripyat Ukraine. While war, the economy, or central planning are the most common reasons for abandoned cities, Pripyat stands apart for being mainly left thanks to a nuclear disaster. That's because, on April 26 of 1986, a catastrophic meltdown occurred inside reactor number 4 at the nearby nuclear power plant at Chernobyl. This spewed flames and radioactive material into the skies over Pripyat, a nearby city built to house the plant scientists and workers. As a result, the city's 49,000 inhabitants were evacuated within 36 hours to ensure no one returned. The Soviet government established a 29-kilometer exclusion zone around the Pripyat and the power plant. Yet, despite this, many former residents have had significant health problems related to their nuclear exposure despite being in the radioactive city for less than 2 days. Most incredibly of all, some still refuse to leave Prip even after the nuclear meltdown, with this population constituting about 400 people to this day. However, despite this massive mess rendering Pripyat inhospitable for at least the next few centuries, authorities have deemed it safe for tourists to venture inside it for short-term visits. Number 7. Kolmanscop, Namibia. Mining towns tend to have a pretty finite lifespan, and Kolmanscop is undoubtedly no exception, located in the southwest corner of the southwestern African country of Namibia. It was founded in 1908 after a nearby railway worker found a large diamond in the area, leading to a massive diamond mining boom. German laborers came in droves to the town, which eventually grew to have amenities such as a hospital, ballroom, theater, sports hall, and casino, the first X-ray station in the southern hemisphere, and the first tram in Africa. However, in 1928, a much larger deposit with much easier to find diamonds was found 260 kilometers south of Kolmanscop. By World War II, the Kolmanscop mines began to become severely depleted, leading to the town being completely abandoned in 1956 due to the natural forces of the desert. Kolmanscop is now covered in knee-deep high. Best of all, it can still be visited to this day. However, because it's located within a restricted area of the central desert known as the Sperrgebied, visitors must obtain a permit before venturing inside. Number 6. North Brother Island. Although technically not a town in the United States, this abandoned location certainly has a much more unsettling history than many other places on this list. That's because this island, located on New York's East River, is infamous for being the location of a hospital for people with highly contagious diseases known as a riverside hospital. It opened in 1885 and mainly housed people with conditions such as typhoid, tuberculosis, and smallpox, with typhoid Mary Maudlin being its most famous patient. Then, after being briefly closed throughout World War I, it was used to house wartime veterans in the 1950s. It was then repurposed as a treatment center for adolescent drug addicts. However, in 1963, the hospital closed its doors for good, and ever since the island has been abandoned and off-limit to visitors nowadays. It's instead being used as a wildlife sanctuary. However, there is research and area planning currently being put in place to perhaps reopen the island to the public shortly. Number 5. Famagusta Cyprus. If you were to turn back the clock to the Middle Ages, you'd see a Famagusta that is far different from its version today. That's because, during this period, it was the island's most important port city as it was a gateway to trade with the prosperous ports of the Levant. However, since then, Cyprus has experienced a lot of turmoil, and in response to a failed Greek coup in 1974, Turkish troops invaded the city that same year in particular. They annexed the Varusha district of the town, which led to the expulsion of all the Greek Cypriots inhabiting it and the sectioning off of the city with barbed wire and widespread looting by the Turks. Thankfully, since then, the situation has primarily de-escalated, and today Cyprus is in a state of uneasy peace between both Greek and Turkish factions on the island. However, despite this, Northern Cyprus's de facto Turkish government had forbidden the old Greek Cyprus to re-enter, not only disallowing them from living in their homes but even forbidding them to reclaim their valuables. The reason for this is although factors such as security and the city's commercial importance have all been cited, this will likely remain the status quo until a completely unified Cyprus becomes a reality. However, in 2017, Northern Cyprus made a surprising move when they opened Varus's world-class beaches to Turkish Cyprus and Turkish citizens. In 2019, they took this one step further by announcing that various formerly world-class hotels would reopen by the end of 2020. However, with many of the specifics still unclear, only time will tell who will be allowed to enter. Number 4. Plymouth Montserrat. If you've never heard of the island territory of Montserrat before, we won't blame you. Located in the southeastern Caribbean, Montserrat is an overseas territory of the United Kingdom. After Plymouth became its first European settlement in 1632, it remained largely forgotten by the world. Yet, a few hundred years later, its existence would come to an abrupt end in July 1995. A series of significant eruptions at Suffrage Hills volcano, which had been inactive for centuries, sent pyroclastic flows and ash across the island's southern portion. As a result, by December of that year, the entire town was completely evacuated, with residents being allowed to return in 1997. However, in June of 1997, the volcano began erupting once again, with these eruptions leading to a permanent evacuation of most of Plymouth's citizens soon afterward. Luckily for the Montserrat Islanders, this evacuation had been well timed because between August 4th and August 8th of that year, a further series of significant eruptions destroyed approximately 80% of the town, burying it under 1.4 meters of ash. This hot material burned many buildings, making habitation nearly impossible for many residents and causing the British Navy to intervene and evacuate those who had remained in the city. As a result, many of the island's residents ended up moving back to the mainland United Kingdom. In turn, the island became economically depressed due to both its population decrease and the destruction of most of its economically profitable businesses. Nowadays, the southern area of the island continues to be deemed as an exclusion zone as volcanic activity in the region has not yet paused. If you'd like to visit some tours or organize excursions to this exclusion zone. Number 3. Hashima Island, Japan. As we alluded to before, mining towns usually aren't places with a very long lifespan, and Hashima Island in Japan was certainly no exception. After a coal mining colony was established in 1887, workers and their families began to flock to the island. Yet after only a brief period, the entire territory was bought out by Mitsubishi, and it would soon become an extremely profitable venture, making this even more apparent. After Korean and Chinese prisoners of war were forced to work in these mines throughout World War II, Hashima Islands continued to grow even after the war. Still, at its height in the 1950s, it housed 5,200 residents in less than a square kilometer, making it one of the most densely packed places on Earth. Yet, in 1974, Mitsubishi closed down their mine, leading to the island being abandoned almost immediately. As a result, the island remains ruined as its concrete apartments, schools, barber shops, and swimming pools all sit empty. Yet despite this abandonment. Number 2. Bodie, California. If you're the type that enjoys an old spaghetti western, chances are that you've heard of Bodie, California in the eastern half of the state. The area was first settled on the border with Nevada after small amounts of gold were found in 1859 and became a full-on town after large deposits of gold were found in 1876. This convinced an influx of prospectors to make the trek over to the city to try their luck, and by 1879 Bodie had a population of about 7,000 to 10,000 people and a total of 2,000 buildings. However, this influx also began to give it a reputation for being a quote-unquote sea of sin, and the town became infamous for its various shootouts, gambling rings, and brothels. Yet the gold deposits and Wild West shenanigans couldn't last forever. In fact, by 1910, the city only had a few hundred people, and in 1942 the last mine was closed, with everyone moving out by the war's end in 1945. As a result, it sat for a couple of decades as a wholly abandoned ghost town. However, in 1961, it was designated as a National Historic Landmark, and in 1962, the California state legislature authorized the creation of Bodie State Historic Park. This led to the 170 remaining buildings being maintained in a state of arrested decay, meaning that while not having been restored but having instead been protected from decomposing further. Although this means that no one can live in Bodie any longer, in a sense, it's now far more popular than it was during its boom years. That's because, to this day, it receives about 200,000 visitors annually and is easily one of the most famous ghost towns in the world. Number 1. Fordlandia, Brazil. While the Ford Motors Company may have made massive strides in improving workers' lives across America and Brazil, the company was less than successful. You see, Henry Ford first began to look to Brazil when he wanted to source his rubber for his tires, as he was growing tired of having to pay for it from the British firms that had a monopoly over the resource. This caused him to invest about $20 million, or about $290 million today, into creating the equivalent of an American working-class town on the Trabajos River, which runs right through the famed Amazon jungle founded in 1928 by Fordlandia. He made amenities such as American-style bungalows, swimming pools, hotels, and even a golf course in the hope that his Brazilian workers would grow accustomed to this type of community. However, to Ford's misfortune, the project became a disaster almost immediately. The first major issue was that there were no roads connecting Fordlandia to the rest of Brazil. Therefore, the only way to enter the town was by the Trabajos River, which proved to be a logistical nightmare. Then, the American planners, who had little knowledge of tropical rubber cultivation, made the mistake of growing all the rubber trees close together rather than spacing them apart, which caused them to quickly succumb to tree funguses, diseases, and various crop-eating critters. Let us know in the comments below which abandoned city you might want to visit one day. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and smash that notification button so you never miss out on any of our latest content. Until next time.